Hi, second graders. It's Miss Shemansky with your Read Aloud today. Today we're going to continue reading about Abraham Lincoln. We're going to continue what we started reading yesterday. So if you did not watch yesterday's Read Aloud or Monday's Read Aloud about Abraham Lincoln, there were two parts. It's really important that you go back and watch them right now because we're going to pick up right where we left off, and I want to make sure my friends are not missing anything. So please, if you missed the first part of our read aloud, please go watch part 1 and part 2 so that you guys can join us right now. So for my friends that have read it, we're going to continue reading right now about Abraham Lincoln. So remember the part that we left off at, Abraham Lincoln had decided that he was going to run for Illinois state legislator. So let's see what happens. Then Indian warriors crossed the Mississippi River to Illinois. White settlers panicked. What if the tribes took back their land? Here below it says, Blackhawk was the leader of the Sauk and Fox tribes, who briefly invaded Illinois in the Blackhawk War. Abe joined the temporary army. His troop elected him captain. Abe made friends with a lawyer named John Todd Stewart, but he never fought anything tougher than mosquitoes or boredom. Like many skirmishes between settlers and Native Americans, the Blackhawk War ended quickly. After the war, Abe had only 2 weeks to campaign. He lost the election. Abe wound up working as New Salem's postmaster. Abe met many people through his new job. He decided to campaign again, so he decided to run one more time. Abe used every chance to get votes. He talked to people at dances, house modeling parties, and even at wrestling matches. Abe was often the referee because everyone trusted him. Victories and vows. This time, Abe won the election and went to the state legislature in Vandalia, Illinois' capital. There, Abe renewed his friendship with John Todd Stewart, who was also a lawmaker. Stewart let Abe borrow his law books. Abe studied by littles wherever he could. When Abe got his lawyer's license, he was invited to join John Stewart's company in Springfield, Illinois. Abe campaigned to move the Illinois capital to Springfield. He wanted his new town to be an important place. Before long, Springfield was the capital, and Abe was at the center of Illinois politics. So here we have our picture and caption, Abe's seat at the Illinois legislature. He got his own seat. Abe spoke out against slavery and lynch mobs, the crowds who hunted down and hanged escaped slaves. But Abe was not one of the abolitionists trying to ban slavery. Abe believed the government should keep new territories free, not try to abolish slavery where it already existed. So here this caption says, when Abe first spoke out against slavery, all these southern and a few northern states were slave states. There was a great debate whether slavery should be allowed in new territories. Abe was a busy lawyer of 30 when he met a woman who seemed his opposite. Abe was tall, thin, awkward, and unrefined. Mary Todd was short, plump, stylish, and charming. He came from a log cabin. She had been raised in luxury and attended fancy private schools. Mary spoke French and knew all the latest dance steps. But beneath the surface, Abe and Mary had much in common. Both cared deeply about justice, politics, and poetry, and both had lost their mothers at a young age. So here we have Mary Todd, the woman that he's met. Mary Todd opposed slavery, but her father owned slaves on his large farm in Kentucky. Mary happened to be the cousin of Abe's lawyer friend, John Todd Stewart. And then here, our picture and caption. Lincoln's look. Abe's rumpled clothes made it clear to people that his mind was on more important things than fashion. His long legs poked from his plain pant legs. His boots were dusty from walking. Abe carried his papers in a tall stovepipe hat that made him seem even taller than his 6 feet 4 inches. Once people met him, they never forgot Abe. So this is something actually Abe is known for even today, for his tall hats. On the move. Abe was elected to Congress, so the Lincolns moved to Washington, D.C. Abe saw slave markets in the country's capital. The Constitution said all men are created equal. How could people be sold like animals? Abe proposed a law to abolish slavery in Washington. That means get rid of slavery. The law did not pass, and Abe lost his second term. Ending slavery would not be easy. So Abe lost his second term. That means people did not reelect him because they didn't agree with him that slavery should be ended. Abe went back to Springfield, but soon joined the Eighth Circuit Court. This traveling court brought justice to small towns, like the trials he had seen as a young man. Abe spent half of the year sleeping on farmhouse floors or sharing beds in crowded taverns. Between cases, the lawyers joked, sang, and played cards. Abe could forget fancy manners and help simple folk. So right here, our caption says, the Eighth Circuit Court served the entire state of Illinois. The judge, Abe, and the other lawyers traveled 500 miles on horseback and then on the newly built railroads. The work was challenging. The lawyers rode into town, found clients, and then presented their cases right away. One time, in New Salem, Abe was asked to defend an old friend named Duff, who was accused of murder. The witness claimed he saw Duff killed by the light of the full moon. But Abe proved the moon was just a sliver on that night, so the witness was lying. Duff was free by nightfall. So right here, our caption says, Fact Book. An almanac is a book of information about a given year. It tells the times of sunrise and sunset for that year, as well as the cycles of the moon. Farmers can use an almanac to predict the weather and decide when to plant crops. Abe was a happy lawyer, but he wanted to help make sure slavery didn't spread into the new territories, so he ran for Senate. Abe gave a speech calling America a house divided. He said, "This government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. It will become all one thing, or all one the other." Our caption here says, Abe had spent his whole life learning to speak. He was not a handsome man, and his voice was shrill. That means it was really high. But when Abe spoke, the power of his emotions shone in his eyes, and people were moved. So even though he didn't have the qualities that you would expect of a speaker, he was a really strong speaker because he was really passionate. Abe's opponent was a famous politician named Stephen A. Douglas. Douglas saw no need to outlaw slavery in the new territories since the land wasn't ripe for tobacco, cotton, or other slave crops. Abe thought Congress had to preserve the new states as places for poor people to go and better their condition. Abe suggested a series of debates. The result was America's greatest duel of words. Abe lost the election but won the acclaim. Just as he had wrestled the strongest man in New Salem, Abe had battled a political giant and proved himself a man worth watching. And by forcing Douglas to take a public stand, Abe made slavery the issue of the day. So here they are debating. The caption says, Douglas was a well-dressed, well-fed statesman who traveled to each debate in his own private railroad car. Abe arrived in the crowded public train and then rode a hay wagon to the hotel. The two candidates were different as purebred poodle and farmland hound. So that just goes to show that Stephen A. Douglas was a wealthy man and Lincoln was not. They're very different. Just 2 years later, in 1860, the Republican Party chose Abe to run for president. Abe had helped form the new party, but did not expect this honor. So here's a little bit about our political parties. The caption says, Party Politics. The Republican Party was created in Illinois in 1856. They favored rule by representation rather than direct vote. During Lincoln's time, there were several other political parties, including the Democrats, Whigs, and Constitutional Union. The Democratic Party was founded in 1830 on the principles of government by people and equal rights for all. Created in 1836, the Whig Party opposed the Democrats until it dissolved in 1856. Originally, Whigs were those who supported the American Revolution. So today we have two main parties, Republicans and Democrats. So things have changed a little bit over history. Springfield went wild. A Republican parade that passed the Lincoln's home contained so many people it took 8 hours to pass the House. There were more than 2 candidates running for president that year. Abe received only 40% of the votes, but he won. However, Abe lost in every southern state. Newspapers raged against Lincoln's anti-slavery stance. They even urged the South to prepare for war. So even though Abe had won president, none of the southern states had voted for him. So that just goes to show that there's going to be a really big debate coming. All right, friends, make sure you stay tuned for part 2 of this video.